At 14, love was her prison. This is the heartbreaking story of Isabel de Valois. 14-year-old Isabella had just been married off to her uncle. She was only 14, and he was twice her age. As if that wasn't bad enough, she had never even met him before. On the day of their wedding, she was held captive and locked in a tower until she finally agreed to accept the marriage proposal. No one knew why her parents had arranged this marriage, but they insisted it would be good for her future. All she knew was that from now on, she would belong to her uncle, Gaston. Gaston had been waiting years for this day to come. He could not believe how lucky he was to marry such a beautiful young girl. He had heard many wonderful things about her, and he could not wait to start making advances on his new bride. But when he got to her room and opened the door, what he saw made him stop in his tracks. There she was, sitting quietly in the corner, hugging her knees. He stepped forward and asked, "Are you ready to marry me, my love?" Startled by his sudden appearance, Isabel dropped her head. She didn't answer. Why? Why did they do this to her now? That question echoed through her mind like thunder. No answer came. No one had an answer. And so the question took root in her heart, growing like a weed, strangling her with its thorns. Gaston was taken aback by his niece's reaction. He had thought she would be excited to see him, but instead she looked as if she wanted to die. Then a wicked smile crept onto his face. He was about to have some fun. "Come now, child. It's time to accept your fate." With those words, he lunged toward her. But before he could touch her, she screamed at the top of her lungs. Her scream was loud enough to wake the dead. It echoed through the castle walls and sent shivers down people's spines. People ran through the hallways trying to figure out what had happened. Who had dared to disturb the tranquility of the castle with such a ruckus? No one knew who had done it. Everyone was scared. They were afraid to ask questions or investigate further because it was forbidden. The screams had come from the room where the young couple was supposed to consummate their marriage. But no one dared to open the door and peek inside. Suddenly, King Louis burst through the door. His eyes were wide with anger. "What's going on in here?" he roared. His voice shook the very foundations of the castle as he surveyed the scene before him. He saw his sister lying on the floor, unconscious. "Get up, you dirty animal," the king snarled at Gaston. "How dare you lay a finger on her?" Gaston, who had not yet realized what had happened, blinked in surprise. "I didn't do anything, Your Majesty. She attacked me," he protested. "That's a lie," said a familiar voice. It was Queen Isabella, the king's wife, who had entered the room. She knelt beside her sister and asked, "Are you okay?" She then turned to Gaston and said, "You are a vile creature. How dare you force yourself on my sister?" Gaston tried to explain, but no words came out of his mouth. He couldn't believe what he had done. How could he explain his actions? The king grabbed him by the collar and dragged him outside. "Get out of here, you pervert. Never set foot in my kingdom again," he said. Gaston didn't resist. He simply nodded and left the castle without another word. Once he was gone, the king turned back to his sister and asked, "Are you sure you're all right?" "I'm fine, Your Majesty," she replied with a shaky voice. But everyone could see that she wasn't fine at all. The king helped her up and led her out of the room, promising to take care of everything. From that moment on, Isabel never had to see Gaston again. In fact, no one ever laid a hand on her against her will ever again. But the trauma of that day stayed with her for the rest of her life. Years went by, and Isabel grew up to become a beautiful young woman. However, the pain in her heart never faded away. She would often have nightmares about that fateful day when she had been violated by her own uncle. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Gaston's face. Every time she heard a door open, she thought it was him coming to hurt her again. She became so withdrawn and quiet that no one knew what to do. They tried everything they could think of, but nothing worked. One day, the queen had an idea. Maybe Isabel just needed a change of scenery, she thought. So she invited her to go on a trip with them to a nearby kingdom. They spent a few weeks there, but it didn't help. As soon as they returned home, Isabel retreated into her shell once more. Her parents were worried sick. They had lost their daughter to the monster that lurked within their own bloodline. They tried speaking to her, reasoning with her, but nothing could break through the wall that had been built around her heart. Then one day, while walking through the castle, Isabel came across a small chapel. She had never noticed it before, but something drew her inside. As she stepped into the dimly lit sanctuary, she saw a priest kneeling before the altar. He turned around and greeted her with a warm smile. For the first time since that horrible day, Isabel felt at peace. She told the priest everything that had happened to her. As she spoke, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. It was the first time she had spoken about it to anyone other than her family, and it felt good to finally get it off her chest. The priest listened patiently, and when she finished, he said, "My child, what happened to you is not your fault. You did nothing wrong." These words meant more to Isabel than any other words had ever meant. To know that someone understood, that someone cared, made her feel human again. From that day on, Isabel visited the chapel every day. She would kneel before the altar and pray for strength. She also started attending Mass regularly and soon became a devout Christian. She dedicated her life to God and vowed never to forget what had happened to her. One day, King Louis came to visit her. He had heard about her newfound faith and wanted to see if it was true. When he entered the chapel, he saw his niece kneeling before the altar. She was praying so fervently that she didn't hear him enter. He approached her and said, "Isabel, I want you to know that I'm sorry. I should have protected you from Gaston." "It's not your fault, Your Majesty," she replied. "I know that now." She told the king about the support she had received from the priest and how it had helped her heal. King Louis was relieved to hear this, but he still felt guilty. He had failed his family, and there was no excuse for that. He promised Isabel that he would always be there for her and never let anything bad happen to her again, and he kept his promise. From that day on, Isabel lived a happy and fulfilling life. She never forgot what had happened to her, but she also never allowed it to define her. She used her story to help other victims of abuse and became known throughout the kingdom for her courage and strength. Although her story is heartbreaking, it is also inspiring. Isabel's story is a reminder that no matter how dark things may seem, there is always hope for a brighter tomorrow. With the right support and treatment, even the deepest wounds can heal, and we can go on to lead happy and fulfilling lives. If you enjoyed this tragic tale, make sure to watch another video just like this one. Thank you for watching.